Day 466 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take that simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, and currently Russia is sitting on 209,940 military personnel losses there, which is just shy of a 210k milestone there. Then when we take a look at the Russian hardware losses, 8 tanks, 10 APVs, 22 artillery, and 2 air defense systems. As Russia continues to be steadily demilitarized by the Ukrainian forces, which is quite ironic considering that Russia wanted to demilitarize Ukraine in its invasion of Ukraine in the first place. Then we'll head back to the map and there's been an interesting change of pace here, as the regular Russian army has started to use their Bakhmut tactics in the Belgorod regions, as they've started to raise some civilian buildings to the ground using aviation and artillery. And so one of these groups, the Russian Volunteer Corps, as part of their operations in Shebekino to take back their own country, are preparing green corridors to evacuate civilians from their own government shelling them. But also, as for the town itself, it appears the Russian army or the locals were looting their own stores before they fled from the location. And there's been a fair number of jokes or memes going around the whole information space right about now about how some Belgorod residents are upset how military activities are occurring in the region and saying that they just wanted to destroy Ukraine in peace. Although really the closest and most recent statement I could find to that effect was from a Russian college student in Belgorod who found it impossible to study from all of that racket. And also in the Oblast, Russia also has newly contested areas to deal with. So I'll just go down there and show you, as the Russian Volunteer Corps performed operations near the Urazovo settlement right there, with clashes taking place against the Russian army, which is somewhat identifiable on this map, with the little oinky pig icon denoting some type of Russian forces in that region. So the Russian army has really been put to a question here as to whether or not they expand or expend their forces to attempt to take new land in the Donbass, for instance, or move whatever army forces they can to protect or take back their existing lands. And incursions could happen anywhere on the Russian border. So Russia has some tough choices to make, and quite possibly for the foreseeable future too. And then moving on, far, far away, but still in Russia, a Russian steel plant is on fire in Orenburg, which is just north of Kazakhstan. Now, the local authorities in the region said that an investigation is underway, but no word yet on what caused this to happen. Although, being that Russia is attempting to re-gear their economy and production capabilities to support their military first and foremost, it's entirely plausible that this was no accident, as we have seen with other partisan actions in the whole of Russia as well. Then moving across to the Ukrainian map. So overnight, Ukraine shot down 4 out of 6 cruise missiles fired from Russia and 3 out of 5 Shahed drones as well. And everything fired into the Ukrainian capital itself, Kyiv, was intercepted. And then we move into the Donbass, and as promised, we're already getting some footage from the Kadyrov-led Chechen TikTok army, as this leg of the Russian army filmed themselves driving into the mines near Bakhmut. And so the footage has already been used by the AFU to determine this exact location where they were. But also, this TikTok battalion, if you will, failed to stay on the road to one of the entrances to the secret salt mines too. So they're already off to not a great start in this region, with already showing a lack of military professionalism and lack of skill. And then also, just north of Bakhmut, in Paraskevivka, Ukrainian artillery and loitering munitions hit and destroyed a Russian tank with several ammunition trucks, all of which happened quite close to Krasnohora. But then as we move down to the Donbass today, a Russian fortification got blown to smithereens in Vuhledar. Just as no good news for the Russian forces ever seems to come out of this area. Then moving across just a little bit, blasts in occupied Berdyansk. So this is in Zaporizhia, so the Berdyansk port, in fact, with locals cheering in this video. And the storm shadows used appear to be worth every cent, as you can see from the before and after satellite photos, where two warehouses on the port of the Russian-occupied Berdyansk region had pretty much turned to ashes. Then, not too far away, the mayor of Melitopol reported that the railway track near Dolinska was blown up. And so it was used to transport Russian personnel and equipment, military equipment, to the front lines, but not anymore. Then moving just a little bit south of here, so Russia reported shooting down a drone near Jankoy in Russian-occupied Crimea, so zoom right in for that. And Jankoy is quite the hub of a crosspoint for the Russian military in this region, and it's truly been no stranger to successful attacks from the AFU previously. Now, I actually don't have a great deal of information about this occurrence, but it's possible that it was a singular scout drone from the AFU gathering intel for an upcoming strike, so we'll see how that one goes. Then we'll move across to a little bit of news for today. So another batch of 25 Italian 155mm M109 SPGs, so big old gun on wheels, or tracks as I like to say, is heading to Ukraine, which is in fact in addition to the 30 already received into Ukraine from Italy from just a couple of months ago. Then in a bit of a Belgorod liberation piece of news, here we have a member of the Russian army from the Belgorod region who said that once the Russian Volunteer Corps or the Russian Freedom Legion group came to town, this guy's comrades from the Russian army fled their positions, which ended up causing him to switch sides. Because as he simply puts it, nobody cares for them. So good on him for switching to the more humane side. And he goes on to espouse the qualities or the ideologies of the need to change for change for his Russian nation. Politically speaking, that would be. But he also calls on others to do the same, so good for him. Then in some other news, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy has stated that Ukraine is ready for the counteroffensive. And he also went on to say, quote, "We would like to have certain things, but we can't wait for months. We strongly believe we will succeed." And so those other things he refers to includes more offensive platforms such as F-16s and the Abrams tanks, which are a little ways away in terms of training and logistics. But Ukraine has a keen assortment of equipment now, and they're probably not looking to miss any potential window openings for a counteroffensive in one or more areas. And then moving on to a strange piece of news. So Prigozhin of the Wagner forces, the Wagner PMC, has come out now saying how he's very, very angry about the way in which the Wagner forces physically left the Donbass when they vacated recently, about last week. So he mentioned that the regular Russian army mined up the roads leading out of the Donbass back to Russia, and did so intentionally in an attempt to destroy Wagner forces. So we have a case of Russians in the military, well, Russians betraying Russians. So as you can see, all the various military units or factions in Russia do not seem to get along that well. And this has been an ongoing issue for quite a while now, which only seems to have become more pronounced at this point. Just groups of ununited savages. Then in another Russian military mobilization blunder, this video appeal is from mobilized Russian soldiers from about 2 weeks ago who moved from their Russian region to the Donbass to fight. And after they got there, they said the training ground in the Donbass is not worthy of the ranks. They've been supplied with subpar equipment with significant damage from previous use, such as the Kevlar and the armored vests, which was obviously taken or pried from their fallen comrades in battle. But even then, they say there's not enough of it. And so they go on to say many of the weapons they received are effectively hand-me-downs from battle that have been restored, but many are still damaged with crooked barrels. And no surprises here, they're also having issues with no documentation confirmations for where they are, whose command they're under, what unit they're under. So they're not on the books, which is convenient, I'll say, for the Russian MOD, so the Russian Ministry of Defense, to say the least. So they're appealing to the Commander-in-Chief Putin to please resolve all these problems in the shortest possible time. And we've seen it all before, but again, they're exactly where and how they need to be for the Russian army. And notice where they are as well. They're actually in a small isolated encampment location separated from other isolated mobilized Russian encampments, somewhere behind the front lines in the Donbass. So in the forest, in this limbo of confusion. And what will happen next is a military truck and a Donbass commander will show up to pick them up and tell them it's their time for performing assault operations, which they haven't been trained for, I can almost guarantee that, at the front lines somewhere in the Donbass. And so far as this video goes, it hasn't happened yet, but what's going to follow on next for these guys, which since it's a 2-week-old video, it's probably already happened. But the commander and the trucks come to pick them up, and they're ordered under threat of death or being considered a traitor of the Russian military if they don't comply and commence said first-line assault operations. And I've got to say, the Russian army has this absolutely compassionless and wasteful process down to an exact science now, like an assembly line or supply chain of madness. Then we'll move across to some quick funnies for today. So now you all know the famous line, Russia is the second best army in Ukraine. Well, even the US Secretary of State, Blinken, is now getting in on that joke. Although he did say it with a straight face most recently when he spoke of it. However, at the same time, he did get a laugh from the audience. He also went on to say how Russia's leadership, equipment, technology, strategy, tactics, and morale is a case study in failure. Wow, just ouch. Then in a final quick funny to round it off today, guys, so paranoid Russian officials continue to crack down on the colors blue and yellow as part of their color police initiatives, which do sometimes have a backfiring effect. So, for instance, with Russia's draconian wartime legislation that supports this, on May 9th, a home care worker was arrested after simply wearing a blue and yellow jacket to work. But then more recently, a man in St. Petersburg of Russia was arrested for wearing the colors as well, for what was eventually determined to be the blue and yellow flag of Russia's own aerospace forces. So here we have this Russian officialdom hysteria that increasingly leads Russia down this totalitarian system of a path. All for a 3-day special military operation. Oh, and even one of the pro-war political parties within Russia didn't like it because its own party's branding features yellow on a blue background. So it's all very Third Reich attitudes, this kind of stuff, which is legislation enforced to suppress enemy symbols and even colors. So that'll be it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, like. Thanks again for all of the support. As always, can't do it without you guys, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.